Ghazala Hashmi is a Virginia state senator. Anthony Daniels is the minority leader of the Alabama House of Representatives. Good to see both of you. Representative Daniels, in your state, Alabama, that bill protecting IVF, as I said, just passed the House, though its supporters say it's not a permanent solution. So what happens now? Do you think IVF will be protected?
Well, there's still a lot of uncertainty. I think there has to be a constitutional amendment that passes long term. The short term solution is that the state of Alabama is hoping that the Supreme Court justices and there's not another lawsuit brought to challenge other parts of the actual law that we passed in 2019 or the personhood bill. And so my bill that I introduced would have I think solved the problem. I had my piece of legislation clearly define a fertilized embryo as not a child. This piece of legislation that the Republicans passed, and we voted for this bill because it does restore services for IVF clinics.
Have you been surprised? I mean, the immediate reaction to this in Alabama, all across the country, has it taken you by surprise?
I was very surprised, but I warned them in 2019 that the bill that we were passing, and I introduced an amendment to protect rape and incest, and all the other bills that they were passing, we talked to them about the unintended consequences that would eventually come. And they had no clue that Roe v. Wade would be overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court. They thought that this was a trial run for them to be able to appeal to their base, but they've not looked at the unintended consequences that continue to plague our state.
So, Senator Hashmi, you sponsored Virginia's Right to Contraception Act. That would codify rights to condoms, the pill, IUDs, Plan B, right? I'm wondering what you've heard from constituents. And as that bill sits on Governor Youngkin's desk, what are you hearing about whether he'll sign it?
Well, thank you so much. And there's been an overwhelming response here in Virginia in support of this legislation. I know I've talked to so many voters who feel after the disastrous Dobbs decision that we have to take action and we have to protect the rights that we thought were previously enshrined. And the right to contraception is certainly one of those. And we have had a great deal of support. And in fact, polling shows that 90% of Americans absolutely support the right to protect the right to contraceptive care and the right to use contraception. We thought these rights were protected after Griswold in 1965, but Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has signaled that he is ready to take another look at Griswold, and if the Supreme Court acts in the same way that it did with Roe v. Wade, then we must absolutely protect the right to contraceptive care, and not just in Virginia, but across the country and hopefully federally as well.
Do you think that what you're hearing from constituents, there is a real level of concern? I think abortion, okay. People understood for a very long time since Roe v. Wade that this was a point of contention. IVF caught people by surprise. But contraception, I think for a lot of people, it never even occurred to them that that could be under threat. How great do you see the threat as?
I see a real threat in many, many states, and that threat is coming from actions such as pulling back state support and funding for individuals to be able to access contraceptive care. It is certainly hitting our low-income communities very hard. Marginalized communities are bearing the brunt of this lack of access. And in the states that we see targeting clinics and providers that provide care for individuals all across the reproductive spectrum, that is where we're seeing the greatest crisis. So as clinics shut down, as OBGYNs leave certain states, and as there is fewer access points for individuals to receive care, then access to contraception is at great risk. And so ensuring that we're able to provide that level of continuity of reproductive care in Virginia is central to the work that we are doing here.
Representative Daniels, I mentioned before that obviously this is having an impact and has started conversations all around the country, the court ruling in Alabama. What have you learned in just the course of days, less than probably, I think it's now a couple of weeks, that you tell other people in other states? I'm assuming that you've had conversations with people in other states who are expressing the same kinds of concerns that you're trying to address.
Absolutely. There are folks that are looking to move to Alabama that's reconsidering. Some of my friends have put me in contact with folks that wanted to ask me some questions directly. That have started the process of going through the IVF process and wanted to make certain that if they wanted to go through this process in Alabama, that it will be something, it will be resolved before April of next year. And so in the bill originally, there was a sunset provision that ended the piece of legislation that was introduced today in April. And so we were able to fight back and get that removed. But we're still not addressing the actual issue here. The issue here is that an individual, an embryo, a fertilized embryo, should not be considered a child. And this is just, in Alabama, that is it's unreal. It's unconscionable that we would even go to those measures to keep women, to take away women's rights.
Well, it's an important conversation, and Virginia State Senator Ghazala Hashmi and Alabama State Representative Anthony Daniels, you're right in the middle of it, and we appreciate you taking the time to come on the program. Thank you.